Hello, everyone. Yeah, this is, so let's start with first things first. Happy birthday, Team Topologies. Team Topologies has been out for 5 years now, and I think we in an industry and as individuals, we gathered some experiences around the topic of team topologies. And the topic itself has also evolved a little bit. And in this talk, I thought that I talk about my experiences as a consultant. I work as a consultant for a company called InnoQ. When I was working with team topologies, so with the ideas of team topologies at my customers, or when I was hired to help organizations to introduce the ideas of team topologies. And I have a little bit of a color code in my slide, which I want to introduce you briefly. So these dark blue black backgrounds with orange letters, they are about things that work quite well. Yeah, so when I mention things on a blue background, that stuff where I say, hey, that's understood, that works well, really well, that's something we don't need to worry about anymore after 5 years. The orange stuff, however, is about topics where maybe things in team topologies are missing. Yeah? Where there is an open thing in team topologies that team topologies just doesn't address, but that's important. Or where there are misconceptions out there at quite a few organizations. And especially on these things, I very often also follow up on advice. So it's not going to be a talk about, hey, this is great, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. No. Maybe this is great, hey, there is a misconception, but please take a look at these things. So basically that's the color code. In terms of the agenda, I will talk about 4 major topics. I will talk about the fundamental for team topologies and the interaction modes. Also in there is a little bit about boundaries for teams, about platforms and platform teams, and some misconceptions and things that have evolved pretty well in the market. I will talk about establishing fast flow. Isn't that what team topology is actually about? Yeah? And a transformation towards team topologies. This is a little bit management heavy in the end. We will talk about crazy stuff like budgeting, salary systems, middle management, and stuff like that, where some concerns may come up. So it will be a very, very broad stuff that I will go through with you together in those now 45 minutes of the talk. Let's start with the fundamental team topologies and interaction modes. And a very, very big misconception that I always see around is that team topologies is just reduced to, hey, there's 4 team types and 3 team interaction modes. And, well, there are those colorful pictures that look fancy, that look nice. And I think this is a little bit dangerous. But let's dig into that topic and debunk that a little bit. So what I see is that the 4 fundamental team topologies, like stream-aligned teams, complicated subsystem teams, enabling teams, and platform teams, are well known. And I want to stress known here. Yeah? This is stuff that most people who had contact with that, who work in an organization with team topologies, know very well. But what I see very often is that many organizations lack preciseness in terms of terminologies and ideas of teams. I think us in the domain-driven design space, we can talk many, many tales about these things. What hasn't, for instance, been labeled a bounded context out there? Well, is that really a bounded context, or is it just some system or some general purpose, whatever boundary in a module? And I think the same thing applies as well to certain fundamental team topologies. So for instance, I very often, and I encourage you to be really, really critical with that, random teams being labeled as stream-aligned teams. We have a stream-aligned team here, we have a stream-aligned team there, this is stream-aligned. It's the same as applying, saying an operations team, oh, that's the DevOps team, for instance. And ask yourself the question, is, for instance, team A really living those behaviors depicted here, which I heavily quoted from the Team Topologies book, is this really the behavior of that team? Yeah? Do they really aim to produce a steady flow of feature delivery? Yeah? Do they quickly course correct? Yeah? Do they have a clear value that they produce, a clear value stream that they are aligned to? Yeah? Very often you will say, well, not so really. Yeah? And I would say, if you go ahead and try to introduce team topologies, and if you're a little bit loose with telling teams, oh, you're streamlined, you're losing the opportunity to sharpen the type of the team, to sharpen the behavior of the team, to sharpen the contract of the team to the outside world, for instance, and be a little bit critical. And what Team Topologies also does promote, and which is sometimes, in my eyes, overseen, is that these team types, that they act as magnets. So basically, a team should be driven to one of these team types. So a team should have a strong tendency towards being a stream-aligned team or a strong tendency towards being an enabling team. You will, in practice, rarely, especially in a starting point, see teams that are already perfect, and I don't believe in perfect here, stream-aligned teams or enabling teams. And what I sometimes do in order to create an awareness for that is that I work together with the teams and that we assess, hey, what aspects of behaviors do we have in our team? And I go ahead and draw images like that with the teams. And of course, you need a high level of psychological safety in the teams in order to create a real honest assessment of that. But you can say, hey, okay, we have a team which has a very, very strong tendency to be an enabling team. Not so many things in terms of stream-aligned or complicated subsystem teams. But, well, there are a few platformy things happening in that team. And you can see, okay, there is probably a certain context switch necessary in that team. Is that now a problem? I would say, as a starting point, that's totally okay-ish. And you will see that very often as a starting point. If I see teams with a tendency towards being enabling teams like that, fair enough. That's totally good. Maybe in a step 2 or 3, we take a look at the platform things and think if we can rearrange these things as well. This visualization is no official Team Topologies visualization. That's Michael experimenting with his customers, basically. After the Team Topologies book was published, if you take a look at the GitHub repository, or also at the website of Team Topologies, you will find out that actually a new classification for a team has emerged. Team type undefined, which is a great thing. I love team type undefined, because it gives us a chance for improvement and a chance for the development of those teams. However, at many situations where I work with customers, I see that this is totally unknown. Oh, whoa, but that's not in the book. Right, that's true, that's not in the book. But the book is 5 years old now, and it would be horrible if we wouldn't learn in 5 years. So time moves on. And you may laugh now, but sometimes with customers, I do something that I like to call socio-technical architecture reviews, where I do a review of the software architecture, but also around the organizational and the socio-technical system around that, how these things fit together. And I have once witnessed a team which looked like this: an enabling, stream-aligned platform, complicated subsystem team. I found that in reality. So they were, on the one hand, writing customer-centric code, but they were also responsible for the definition of domain-specific languages, especially in combination with code generators for MDSD development, with code generation, like good old MDA stuff. And they had a platform around these things. They had worked heavily with Eclipse-based tooling around these things, where they had an integrated IDE on the DSL, for instance, that they provided to other teams. And this was, and they helped the other teams with the DSL stuff. And that was obviously also very complicated stuff. Everyone who has worked with code generation based on DSLs will probably agree with me. The cognitive load of that team was through the roof. And this team is undefined. They are either everything, or they don't fit into the team topology scope. And I actually prefer team type undefined for that because it creates a sense of urgency. We need to do something in this area. There needs to happen something. And this team was not very happy. Another thing that I very often see is that it's very well understood that boundaries for responsibilities of teams are important. However, a shortcut that I very often observe is something that I would call a domain-driven design frenzy. People say, oh, let's do some DDD workshop, let's cut some bounded contexts, and let's match the teams just to the bounded context, and everything is perfect. As much as I love my DDD stuff, as much as I am absolutely behind the idea that bounded contexts are a really great idea, we need to be aware that team topologies actually promotes additional perspectives towards team boundaries. It's in the chapter called fracture planes. And in those fracture planes, the bounded context is one approach towards cutting team boundaries. And what has worked for me very well in practice is that I actually start with the bounded context. That I take a look, hey, how can we cut domains, subdomains, how can we land bounded context with the teams together, and we do that in collaborative modeling sessions. I very heavily, for instance, worked with the bounded context design canvas from the DDD crew in that regard. But after that, I highly recommend you to broaden your perspective. Take a look, for instance, about regulatory compliance, about team locations. Do you have distributed teams? Are they all in the same location? A thing that I personally change when I work with the fracture planes is the performance isolation thing, because I think that's a little bit isolated. What I very often say is, what are the quality attributes to the stuff that this team produces? It's not just performance, it's maybe scalability, UX requirements, it can be robustness, consistency, whatever. Typical, very often ISO 21010 quality trees and stuff like that. Stuff that you very often do in software architectural work, that I go through. Another approach to that could also be that you take a different look at that with the independent service heuristics propagated by the Team Topologies team. And my hint for that is take a look at that from various perspectives. I think starting with domain-driven design stuff is a good idea, but I think you shouldn't stop with that perspective and then just say bounded context team, bounded context team, bounded context team, bounded context team. I think rarely I've seen that really working, this very simplistic perspective. If you want to dig deeper into that, the Team Topologies folks have actually published a mini book called Finding Software Boundaries for Fast Flow, with articles by the absolutely amazing Susanne Kaiser, by Alberto, Nick Tune, Rich, and Matthew also contributed to that, as well as myself. But I didn't write so much about boundaries. I wrote about something different that I'll also mention. There is an awareness for the importance of cognitive load, but there is a struggle how to measure cognitive load. How can we define and see what works well in that regard? And I think this is a point where a lot of research has been made, but this is also an area of a very big uncertainty. The Team Topologies folks actually came up with a new thing called temperature. I have to say, this probably fits Team Topologies, but I have never tried that in practice. So I can't tell you if I think this is a great idea or if it's not a great idea, but there is something out there which is rather new. Yeah, that's all I can say about that. In terms of the interaction modes, I would say they are also well known. But again, in terms of preciseness and simplicity. Regularly, I meet folks when I do consulting gigs who have the attitude X as a service equals good, collaboration equals bad. Yeah? This is not what Team Topologies promotes. Yeah? This is not the case. Yeah? Actually, Team Topologies promotes a nuanced approach towards collaboration and X as a service. Yeah? So collaboration is a good thing if it is limited in time and if it follows a clear purpose. Then collaboration may be a really great idea. Think about collaborating with each other to come up with a really good idea and a really solid model for later X as a service relationships. Yeah, that's what Team Topologies promotes. And there is actually also a team interaction mode called undefined now, yeah, which is also not in the book, which has been added later on. And the suggestion is, yeah, to use the undefined interaction for long-running collaborations that don't follow a clear purpose. Yeah, we sit together, we have regular meetings and waste a lot of time talking to each other, collaborating without establishing clear X as a service relationships or sharpening our boundaries. Yeah? But I have to admit, collaboration, facilitating, and X as a service are sometimes not deep enough to get a real thorough understanding of the socio-technical dynamics that you have in a system. Yeah? And what I have been working with heavily in the last, I would say, 3 years or something is combining Team Topologies collaboration modes with context maps from domain-driven design. Yeah? Using context maps as a deep dive facility, as a deep dive way to dig into those relationships. Yeah, for instance, here we have an X as a service relationship between a complicated subsystem team and a streamline team. Let's dig into that with a context map. Yeah? So basically, the X as a service looks like, hey, there is an open host service, and on the other hand, we have, for instance, an anti-corruption layer. Yeah? So we see, okay, there is a certain dependency, and this looks rather loosely coupled because of the anti-corruption layer. If that would be, for instance, a conformist, it's still okay. I'm definitely not in the group of people who say ACL good, conformist bad. Yeah, that's not a valid perspective in my eyes. It's always a trade-off discussion, but you can see how coupled the relationship is. And the same can apply if you say, hey, is there somewhere a customer-supplier relationship, for instance, yeah, on an X as a service relationship? I mean, you don't want to actually have a customer-supplier relationship on an X as a service relationship. But in reality, sometimes that happens, and the context map helps you to find hotspots, to identify hotspots in those relationships. Yeah? Or a collaboration between a complicated subsystem team and a streamline team. How does that look like? Oh, there is a shared kernel in the middle with a partnership. That's a very strong kind of a collaboration, yeah, between the two. If that's on a very limited time, and if there is a clear target to get rid of that, to loosen that collaboration, fair enough. If that stays forever, I would tend to ask questions on that. So combining context maps with the interaction modes can give you deeper insights into these things. And the same applies to X as a service. What I see is very often interpreted too relaxed. Oh, it's just, they call an API. But what's the governance dynamics behind those APIs? X as a service for me is very, very much self-service driven, not very much collaboration going on or communication going on. It's like you call an API from Google Maps. You don't sit together with the Google team, don't you? Yeah? You don't. And I see the same applies to the streamline teams. Yeah? If you say, oh, that's an X as a service relationship, and in fact, it is a very, very, let's say, ambitious interpretation of the X as a service relationship, you lie to yourself. and you prevent from sharpening that relationship in the future. Yeah? Let's take a brief look into platforms and platform teams. Yeah? I think Team Topologies really ignited and helped to move platform engineering forward. Yeah? I think it really created a certain sense of urgency, and I think that is understood. What very often is overseen, yeah, that there's actually a difference between logical platform and the platform team. Yeah? So the logical platform can, inside, consist also of several team types. Yeah? That's very often overseen. Yeah? And maybe that's a bit unfortunate, yeah, that we have this platform and platform team, maybe two different terms, would have helped people to understand that difference a little bit better. Yeah? And I think the idea of a thinnest viable platform is even more ignored than the minimum viable platform in many organizations. Yeah? We tend to over-engineer very, very early on platforms. And I think good product development practices and thinking in terms of minimum viable products, and a platform is a product. The platform team should have product thinking. Yeah? A very strong product thinking with adaptation course is something that is very often ignored, and I highly recommend you to think that way with regards to these things. But nevertheless, Team Topologies, in my eyes, ignited a high desire for self-service capabilities in many organizations. Let's move to fast flows. Fast flow. Please don't do Team Topologies for the sake of the team types and the team interaction modes. Do it for improving flow in your organization, in your delivery organization. In recent months and years, I see a higher tendencies for that to be in the sense of awareness that we want to do that. And I think in order to improve on flow, we need to make flow visible. Yeah, we need to make it tangible for various stakeholders. Yeah? We need to create an understanding, hey, there is a blocker of flow, and that blocker of flow looks like this and like that, and so on. And I think the visualizations provided by Team Topologies, yeah, may be a little bit too unstructured and a little bit too superficial in order to really identify blockers of flow. Yeah? So that's a typical Team Topologies type of visualization. Yeah, that looks good, and that's fair enough. And recently, on the website, they've also introduced visualizations where handovers are present, or where we have the undefined teams, undefined interactions. That's something that you can do. But I think there are, in order to visualize the flow, better ideas on the market right now, especially, and I highly want to recommend you the flow engineering book by Steve Pereira and Andrew Davis. Yeah? I think Steve and Andrew really dug deep into making flow tangible, visible, and in order to operationalize on flow. And I've tried that with customers already, and it really helped us very, very well. Yeah, and they have 4 different stages for visualizing flow: outcome mapping, value stream mapping, dependency mapping, and capability mapping. And what I especially like is the value stream mapping part in flow engineering is very, very much tailored to software delivery. Yeah? And whereas the classical value stream mapping, yeah, from the good old value stream mapping, is, from a software perspective, very often I also went ahead and simplified it a bit when I worked with customers on that regard. I think these ideas in that book are really, really a great, great fit for Team Topologies to work together in order to make flow visible and to identify blockers of flow. Yeah? Very often I've seen a high degree of understanding, okay, we need to do something here, we need to do something there. And I think that can be combined very, very well together, in my experience. This is a great book, which I highly recommend. Now let's get into the hard parts. Transformation towards Team Topologies. what I observe is a high drive for team topologies among the teams themselves. Very often when I analyze where do leads for team topologies consulting and so on come from, it's actually from teams or from team leaders. Yeah? And I think it's also understood that enabling teams are a key success factor for successful transformations. And I would like to dig into that a little bit with a little bit of a storyline here. Yeah? We have a boss, yeah, and she wants to speed up the flow of work. She wants a faster time to value or market, however you want to call it. And the teams, however, they complain. Yeah, we can't move faster. We have too many bottlenecks. And maybe the architecture team comes up. Hey, let's do microservices in the cloud. That's a great idea. We speed things up. Perfectly technical, feasible. And the boss says, yeah, good idea, but we have to combine that with cross-functional agile teams. So the desired goal would look like something like that. We have team boundaries, let's say for a sales funnel, for scoring, contracting, customer contact, and so on. And the expectation is, hey, I want you folks to be as autonomous as possible. Now, when you start in an organization with something like that, you will very, very quickly see that these teams will burn out, yeah, because they're overwhelmed, yeah, and they have a point. So some outside voice comes in that says, hey, we have a valid point, and there's sometimes a misunderstanding. Hey, folks should be excited. Isn't that cool that you have autonomy now, that you have responsibility, that you can do things your way? But let's take a look at the cognitive load of these teams, yeah, in these transformation areas, yeah. And I created a little cognitive load-o-meter, yeah. So they need to split up the monolith. They need to learn maybe new technologies. Now, oh, you need to do DevOps now. That's a great idea, yeah. Oh, and by the way, we're building microservices, so you have to learn all the intrinsic details of distributed systems, yeah. And you are responsible for all that stuff. That's not going to work, yeah? And I think this will burn out the teams. And team autonomy is also a construct where I see a lot of misconceptions. For me, team autonomy always implies certain boundaries, certain guardrails to that. And I think, yeah, you need to gradually grow the ownership. You need to grow the autonomy of these teams that are getting started with these things. If you give a team with not a lot of knowledge, not a lot of maturity in these engineering practices, a lot of responsibility and freedom, yeah, they will end up in total chaos. They will feel like, oh my God, we're involved, what do we do? They won't make decisions. Yeah? If you have a very experienced team and limit their freedom, they feel captive. And, oh, the managers again. Yeah, so please be aware of that. And when you establish enabling teams, make sure that you enable the future enablers, that they are actually capable of doing the enabling. Yeah? Very often in many organizations, people were used to telling others what to do and not so much used to coaching. And this is also a learning. Yeah? This takes time. Personal development can be a stakeholder that can help you very well with that. I've worked together with a bunch of HR and personal development teams who did a tremendous job of creating a bubble of psychological safety for these teams and creating a sense of security for these teams where they can grow, yeah, and get into the enabling. And then we go the first small steps, do the enabling work. Maybe they'll fail here and there, but having their back by the management is super important. Yeah? And sooner or later, yeah, we gain experience, we work as an enabling team, that stuff flies. Yeah? And after that, we shift the responsibility to those teams. Yeah? So they say, okay, we have these things in control. But what happens to the enabling team then? If it's no longer needed? Yeah? Maybe they get dissolved, but they should be merged into the other teams with their expertise. Yeah? Please don't fire everyone. And mind, this is a dangerous thing, yeah? Because it creates a lot of insecurity and disturbedness, and be very, very sensible with these things, please. Yeah? at least in Germany, yeah, I'm from Germany, so I mostly work with German customers. And German organizations are sometimes very Tayloristic, very hierarchical. And we have a plethora of middle managers. Yeah? And very often, this group of people is super scared of team topologies. Do you have an idea why? Do you know what the question is, what these folks most of the time ask me? Where am I? Yeah? Where am I in this picture? I don't see myself here. And please mind, psychological safety also applies to folks in management positions. They also have families to feed. Yeah, it's always easy to bash on the middle management. Oh, those middle managers, they're like putting the brakes on everything and so on. But these are also people with families who want to earn a living, and very often, yeah, they got promoted, yeah, they were engineers, then they were senior engineers, then they were architects, and the next career ladder in a certain organization was, oh, you're now a manager, and now you're a middle manager, yeah. So these are not bad people at all. They have fears as well. And you have to work with those fears. If you don't address those fears of those people, they will block you. And they have the power to block you. Yeah? So please be aware of that. Yeah? Because without them, the whole thing won't work. And what I very often recommend to my customers is a management enabling team. Yeah? So we set up a dedicated enabling team for managers that works with them in the transformation, that shows them their place. And there is an analogy that I like quite a bit, is that the type of management that you want in this area is that they see themselves as gardeners. Yeah? So they create a soil where the plants can grow. Yeah? Sometimes the soil and the seed, they need water. Sometimes they need a booster or something like that. Sometimes it's good to let them grow and find out what they do. And I think such a management enabling team, yeah, can address a lot of fears and concerns, yeah, can help with questions like budgeting and salaries. We'll get to that later. Yeah? And it also coaches the teams and the managers in terms of sensibility for cognitive load and so on. I've made very, very good experiences with this idea, yeah? Because this can really move things forward in many organizations that are very hierarchical. Yeah? A very big showstopper can be salary systems. It sounds stupid, but it is like it is. Let me get back to the example that I had. And this is a story from the real world. So we were starting to ramp up enabling teams for software architecture. Yeah, we wanted to move a lot of architectural decision-making into the teams, yeah, so that they can move forward, that they can do their jobs. And suddenly, someone knocked at the door. It was the Workers' Council. Hey, we have a few questions. What are you doing here? Oh, we're improving people's work. They get more autonomy, they get more freedom, and we also increase collaboration and decrease orders to others, and we go into all the agile collaborative modeling, whatever stuff. Isn't that great? Well, that's not so easy. We're against that idea because of the current salary system. Our reaction was like that in the first place. And then they said, let's take a look at the salary system. So there are salary bands in that organization. Let's say for software architects, we have 3 levels of salary bands. Yeah? On the first level, yeah, you design architectures which are being reviewed by more senior folks. On the second level, you tell others what to do in the software architecture. Yeah? And you're responsible for those instructions. On the third level, yeah, you lead teams of architects and so on. The second level was the roadblocker. So if you change software architecture work from telling others what to do towards enabling others to do the work, those folks won't get a pay raise anymore. That happened in that company. And that was a heart blocker. Yeah? And this prevents everyone from earning more money in the future. Yeah? And by the way, they said also for the domain experts in the business side, they get more money if they tell the developers what to do in UML. That really happened at that company. That the business was drawing UML diagrams to the sequence diagram level, and the developers were just coding that down. Taylorism full on. Yeah? You need to bring in HR on these things very early. And you need to work with HR. I started my career as a software engineer and then somehow grew into software architecture, DDD, whatever stuff. And I never thought at the beginning of my career that I would sit together with HR folks and personal development folks talking about salary bands and stuff like that. This customer addressed it with a quick fix. So the salary band, the good advantage was we had C-level support. Yeah? And it got changed to you tell others what to do or you coach others. So we added an or as a first step with the goal in 5 years that this telling others what to do diminishes from the salary band. Yeah? So that was the compromise. Another thing that I want to talk about is budgeting. How do we allocate budgets for these teams? I mean, cross-functional teams, team autonomy, looks really great. I think most of the people here will agree to me that many of the agile ideas are a good idea. But I have to say, what I always joke about is in terms of agile and so on, the boss fight is the budgeting process and budget allocation. Yeah? How do we do budgeting? Yeah? So if you have budgeting rounds year by year by year, so that you need to tell someone in August or July 2024 what you want to do until the end of 2025, you carve things in stone. Yeah? And that's actually preventing you from reacting quickly to changes and so on. So in my eyes, there are 4 budgeting strategies. There's like value stream funding, team-based funding, outcome-based funding, and incremental funding. Whereas value stream funding is very, very much tailored to value streams, yeah, where you say, okay, we have a certain value stream, they get a funding for delivering certain criteria around that. Team-based, we just do a head count. Okay, we have this head count of internal folks, where we need some more external folks. It's very much headcount based. Outcome based is very often tied to certain OKRs and stuff like that. And incremental is that you just shorten the budgeting cycles, yeah, from, let's say, a year budgeting to 3 months or 6 months or something like that, to shorter cycles. Yeah. With the remarks to these options, I think value stream and outcome-based funding, they are very, very suitable for stream-aligned teams. Yeah? The incremental funding, I want to mention one thing here. I think this is something that, in my eyes, works very well in highly exploratory settings. But you need to be aware that this creates a lot of overhead. Yeah? If you take a look at the budgeting process in many organizations, that's already overhead. And if you run through that every 3 months, good night. Yeah? So that's going to be, in my eyes, pretty tough. So what I very often recommend to the customers that I'm working with in this area is you create an overall budget for all of these teams. And then I would go for value stream and outcome-based funding on stream-aligned teams, complicated subsystem teams. Maybe also platform teams. For the enabling teams, I think team-based and outcome-based funding is way better, but I would actually prefer the team-based funding. Same may apply to platform teams. Let me add something to the enabling teams. The enabling teams can see themselves as an internal consulting firm. Yeah? And that they create their own business model based on the services that they offer other teams. This is a very, very advanced budgeting technique, which is a very heavy culture shift for many existing organizations. Yeah? So, hey, you want to be enabled, and obviously you need to be enabled. It's part, actually, of the behavior of a stream-aligned team that they proactively go to the enabling teams, yeah, in order to improve on things. Yeah, so it's part of the behavioralist in the Team Topologies book. So they go to the enabling teams and say, hey, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? That would be a great idea. And, well, the enabling team makes them offer. Hey, we can send you 2 enablers or 1 facilitator to your team for 1 day per week or 2 days per week or for X hours over a 2-week period, and that costs you X. Do you want to do that? That they do the budgeting like a consulting firm. Yeah? What consulting firms offer their things. And if there is no more demand for the kind of enabling that the enabling team does, it's an indicator that the maturity of the stream-aligned teams has probably risen to a very, very good level, and that the enabling team needs to pivot. Yeah? I think personally, this is a great idea. Yeah? The same could be applied to platform teams as well. The platform teams also think financially, yeah? Not just technologically or domain specific, that they see themselves as internal software as a service providers. Yeah? And with, for instance, hey, you as a team, you can buy various levels of support. They have the bronze, the silver, the gold, the platinum tier, or whatever, and come up with their own pricing strategies and also give discounts on stuff that they want to push into the organization, where they say, hey, we have this new great stuff, but we need to learn with that. If you as a team want to try that out, and if you want to give us the chance to learn, we'll give you a rebate, yeah, or something like that. That's also feasible, but warning, this is a brutal culture change for many organizations. And I think that idea is interesting. I'm not so sure if it will scale to very, very large organizations. I haven't seen that happening at very large organizations, rather at smaller ones. But I think those are approaches how you could approach budgeting in that area as well. All right, so we have talked about stuff that works in team topologies from a perspective of the topologies themselves, the interaction modes, platform teams, fast flow, transformation towards team topologies. A few key messages that I want to send out is be rigid, be strict. Don't lie to yourself by labeling things with fancy names that they don't represent. Yeah? Be honest about that. Yeah, and because this honesty, this transparency gives you a chance to improve things. Yeah? Always think about flow. Make flow visible. Yeah? The flow engineering stuff really helps you with that. And team topologies is not just an IT thing. Yeah? And I see that stuff being discussed way too much in the IT space and not so much discussed in the HR space and so on. And I recently, I think a bunch of months ago, wrote to Matthew and Manuel and said, hey, actually, you folks need to move that to the HR space. Yeah? This is where that belongs. Yeah? This is where we need to create a sense of urgency. Yeah? And actually, what I see is that I witnessed a very, very big openness from those stakeholders. Yeah? Oh, those are great ideas. And I would assume most of you are in software architecture or software engineering positions or agile coaching positions. There is a great book by Gregor Hoppe, The Software Architect Elevator, where he says in those transformation projects, as an architect, you need to write the elevator. Yeah? That you need to talk to the engine room, that you need to talk to the folks in the penthouse, yeah, the management tier, and you need to find a good language for that. I think with team topologies, you can write that elevator really nicely. And I think you have to write the elevator, yeah, that Gregor promoted in his amazing book. And yeah, so that's it from my side. For the German-speaking folks, there is now also a German version of Team Topologies out there from O'Reilly. Yeah, that was translated by me. I'll be around at the conference for all of the 3 days, and I'll also be around at the InnoQ booth, so if you want to chat, don't hesitate to hit me up. And yeah, thank you very much.